So thank you very much and good afternoon, everybody. It is wonderful to be here again in CoMotion, Miami, and we all appreciate you taking the time to join us for what promises to be a really exciting and engaging discussion. One of the things that I like to do before we dive in is to provide a little bit of context. I always like, those of you that know me know that I like to throw a few statistics out just to kind of get us started and get us thinking. So really, these are some statistics have to do with, there are a lot of people and goods moving around. And transportation is really at a critical juncture right now. In 2024, the 30 hub US airports served 1.4 billion passengers. In 2022, 299 seaports moved 2.6 billion tons of goods, and in 2023, welcomed 18 million cruise passengers. And just a little Florida twist here, many of Florida's ports are seeing an average growth of 16% annually. That is tremendous growth. That's passenger growth. Public transit systems have seen a rebound with a 17% increase in ridership in 2023, and the anticipated continued growth is over 6% annually expected through 2027. And on our roads, Americans lost an average of 43 hours sitting in traffic, costing the economy more than $70 billion in lost productivity. So these numbers, they're not just statistics. They represent millions upon millions of personal journeys, commuters trying to get home on time, travelers passing through bustling airports and seaports, and businesses depending on the smooth flow of goods. And behind every one of those journeys is a rising expectation for better communication, a more seamless experience, and above all, a safer experience. You heard Mike and Abnett talk about safety earlier. As travel commerce and congestion grows, safety has never been more critical. Whether it's on a highway, in a terminal, or across an integrated transit system, delivering innovative, customer-centered service today means not only making travel easier, but also making it safer and more resilient. So today's conversation is about how transportation leaders are answering the call through technology, through smarter service design, and through bold leadership. I am honored today to be joined by three extraordinary leaders who are at the forefront of that work. First, we have Commissioner Butch Ely. He is the Deputy Governor and Commissioner of Transportation for Tennessee. He's a top advisor to Governor Bill Lee and oversees transportation and infrastructure investments across the state. Before his public service career, Commissioner Ely founded and led Infrastructure Corporation of America, bringing valuable private sector insights to today's infrastructure and safety challenges. Sitting next to him, we have Collie Greenwood, who serves as General Manager and CEO of MARTA, leading the largest expansion and modernization program in the agency's history. A 45-year transit veteran who began his career as a bus operator. So we could say, Collie, you probably understand transit from soup to nuts, correct? Collie rose through leadership as at the Toronto Transit Commission before joining MARTA, where his team's achievements earned MARTA the Outstanding Public Transportation System Award from APTA. He also serves on APTA's Executive Committee and chairs its Standards Development Council. And then we have Rich Davey. He's the Chief Executive Officer of the Massachusetts Port Authority, also known as Massport, which you'll hear us refer to it today, I'm sure. A $1 billion revenue organization whose airports, cruise terminals, and shipping ports generate nearly $22 billion annually in economic impact. Rich has held some of the most senior roles in U.S. transportation, including president of the New York City Transit and Secretary of Transportation for Massachusetts. He also brings private sector expertise from his time as a partner at Boston Consulting Group. So each of these panelists brings a wealth of experience and a bold vision for what customer service, innovation, and safety leadership should look like in transportation's next era. So to get started, I'm actually going to take a seat, and I'm going to ask each of them to dive right in and share a bit about their organization, its mission, and some of the top priorities that they're focused on as they work towards elevating customer service. So, Commissioner Ely, would you like to begin?
Am I on here? Yes, I am. Thank you, Beth. First, I want to thank Beth and CoMotion, and um, we happen to work together through what we're doing with our new choice lanes, which we'll talk about in a little bit. I see Greg over here. He's got a lot of experience in that, and so just appreciate the opportunity to be here, and thank you, Beth. You know, when I think about transportation, it's one of those government services that every single person, almost every single person, every day participates in. And, you know, it's not just about steel and asphalt. It's about connectivity. It's about mobility. It's about how do we get people where they need to be on a daily basis. And so it's so much more than about the construction, which means it is all about customer service. So when we think about the topic of this meeting, to me, it means a lot, because we certainly are trying in Tennessee to be customer focused in our approach. And so as we think about the nexus there, there's so much opportunity to embed and integrate customer service into this process. So one thing that's interesting to me, I kind of came out of the government sector. I went to DC right out of college, and so I've been on the federal level. Came back and was chief of staff in the mayor's office in Nashville, and then I came over. And then I started a business, which Beth alluded to, ICA, and so I think that I have a good understanding of what it takes from a private sector standpoint to be successful dealing with the public sector. And so so it's been an interesting ride here for the last few years, working in the governor's office at Tennessee. And I would say to the customer service aspect, what we initiated were several, I'll call it idea arcs. One being asset management. Mike talked about that this morning. You know, an asset management approach of maintaining what you already have is kind of foremost in the mindset of what we tried to do in Tennessee. The other thing is moving toward a performance-based approach. We're you know, for so long, most states have been a worst first, just deal with the worst problem that's out there before you. And what we've tried to do is to move more toward predictability and being able to know that what the performance levels, which has helped us to get more dollars invested in Tennessee, because what we've been able to pitch to the legislators is, this is what you're going to get for this level of service. If you want this, then then we need a little more. And so that's what we've been able to do. And then the other thing from a customer service standpoint is the delivery model. I mean, for way too long, we started with kind of telling legislators what they wanted to hear, and we would start a project that we really could never finish. And so, people ask, how did we move at the pace that we have moved toward in the last few years? And it's really not rocket science. It's really doing what you say you're going to do, and that's what we've tried to do, is finish what we start. And so we created a fiscally constrained budget process that allowed us to be able to say, here's our 10-year plan, and we've got the dollars to do every one of these projects, where historically all we did was start it. And so, to me, from a customer service standpoint, Beth, it's more about doing what you say you're going to do that has allowed us to advance that. And we'll talk about it later if we have an opportunity, but it being able to convince our legislators, which at the end of the day are the ones that approve the budget, to be able to say, hey, I'm going to invest in this because this is what we're going to get at the end of the day. So, all right.
Thank you, Commissioner. Collie, you're up next.
Thank you, Beth. Good afternoon, everyone. Collie Greenwood, General Manager, CEO of MARTA. I want to correct the record right out of the gate. Beth said, now it's not Beth's fault, she had copy given to her. She said I had 45 years experience in the transit system.
I was wondering about that. Like, you're not that old.
Not happening.
I was just wondering how you were going to address that. That's why I put it in.
Not her fault at all. We'll have to get that checked. But that's about 10 years too many. No, but MARTA is at an exciting time and place right now. We have 38 stations, 65 million annual riders, 104 miles of track, lots of infrastructure to maintain, signaling systems, and a lot of it on the verge of change. I talk about the infrastructure that we have, and I try to remind our team that in a best case scenario, transit is not the story. We're never the story. We support the story, and like infrastructure, we want to just get our work done quietly and without incident. When you think about the water in your taps, people don't talk about the water until it stops working, right? So it's a comfortable place to try to be, but that that's never the case. And as the World Cup is coming to town, transit is at the top of everyone's mind. And if things go right, nobody talks about it, but if things goes wrong, transit becomes a story. So we're forever trying to make sure that our customers respect what we do and that we respect their expectations. We recognize that transit has always been a social force. That's been the way we've talked about transit for so many years. The commissioner talked about the connectivity that it brings and how it enables people to get on and do what they want to do. So we'll get you where you're trying to go so that you can actually get to where you're trying to go. But it's more and more we're recognizing what an economic force transit is. And so for both of those reasons, we recognize that it's important that we get it right. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. We're talking about some of the ways that technology and innovation can help us continue to get this right. Great.
Rich?
Well, I thought child labor laws were violated. That's with the explanation on how you had worked so long, Collie. Well, good afternoon. Thanks for having me, Pat. Appreciate being here and in this auspicious panel. I've had the opportunity to run 2 transit systems and to be a secretary for transportation for a state. I know the hard work that these gentlemen undertake every day on behalf of their constituents, so thank you guys. So a couple comments to start. So Massport is a really interesting place, and we'll get into some of the specifics of that, but maybe just taking a step back, why I've been in this business now for 2 decades. It goes back to a clock my mother gave me when I became general manager of the MBTA 15 years ago, and it said, you're only as good as your last rush hour. And I thought, if this is my mother judging me twice a day, I can imagine what the rest of the world is doing, right? But that's the beauty of this, right? And so Beth first started off with some numbers, a lot of volume, right? And I think my critique of transportation in my career is we often measure things by volume, how many passengers and the cargo load and how many cars moved in our road and how many tolls we collected. But at the end of the day, every one of those toll payers or customers at MARTA or coming through my airport have a story. And it might be bad. I often remind my team, like, look, there could be someone today who's flying off to their honeymoon, and they're so excited. And there's probably someone else in our airport who's off to bury a parent, or a child for that matter. It's one thing I had no appreciation for is how often we are we're facilitating the dignified return of remains for folks in Boston who may have died on vacation or may have been a World War II soldier. So it's a story, and I think the essence is not volume. The essence is about the customer satisfaction, which we'll talk about. But I've had the opportunity to work in lots of different places and lots of different cities and do lots of different things. But fundamentally, getting back to what are our customers telling us and how do we respond to them is the essence, I think, of why we're here and what we're going to talk about. And my mother, of course. We'll stop.
Great, thank you very much. And sorry, Kali, I think I did that on purpose, actually. All right, so let's dig a little bit deeper because you've each talked about customer service. That's the title of this panel. But we have a really great cross-section of our transportation industry here, right? We have a Department of Transportation, we have a transit agency, and we've got airports and seaports, and also a little bit of transit too, right, Rich? So can you help our audience a little bit with an understanding of how you define your customers and just your overarching approach to customer service? So Butch, I know you touched on that a little bit already. Is there anything more that you wanted to add in terms of the actual customer?
I think the one thing I would say, most of you in this room have read Stephen Covey's past books, but the speed of trust is what I have seen happen in Tennessee. People said, there's no way you're going to get tolling in Tennessee a few years ago. And we were able to make a case that made logical sense, and we were able to deal with our legislative partners to pull together to create a plan that allowed us to leverage private sector dollars through P3. We didn't even have public-private partnership authorization until 2 years ago. And we pulled together and we were able to demonstrate through the trust factor that we would deliver what we're setting out to deliver. And so that has been paramount, I think, in being able to deliver that customer service that we're on the route to delivering for Tennessee.
Thank you, Commissioner. Kali, Rich, anything you'd like to add in the customer definition?
I love the question because every day our customers define us, so it's an opportunity for us to talk about how we define our customers. At MARTA, we've taken the opportunity to develop at least a dozen customer personas, and it really helps focus the conversation, whether you're gathering to imagine a capital program or an expansion or a service change and disruption and how you manage it. It helps to look through the lens of various different customer personas so that you don't miss the needs, whether it's academic pursuits, whether it's financial position, whether it's physical ability, mental abilities. All of that has to come into play when you're defining your customers so that you can get a bespoke service to the extent mass transit can to each of your customers.
Thank you. That's a lot of profiles.
Yeah.
It is, yeah.
It's incredible.
Well, there's 65 million riders each year, so a dozen's really a small number when you think about it, because I think it was Rich that made the point. Everyone's got a story, and that makes everyone unique. And this is not, car service one-on-one, but we can do the best we can to make it mean as much as it can to each of those riders.
Yeah.
Excellent. Rich, would you like to?
Not much to add other than I think then really granularly knowing your customer, right? So it's the segmentation, I think, as Kali mentioned. But then it's also truly understanding what is on your customers' minds. Q Arroyo's in the back. We worked together at MTA in New York, and one thing that we did when I had the chance to work there for the 2 years was to monthly ask our customers what was on their mind. We had this conversation before Beth, and for our subway customers at that time, the number one issue was mental health, right? And what we used, is this off the record? I'm kidding. What we did to use these customer satisfaction monthly polls, if you will, was to move public policy with the mayor and the governor to actually invest in mental health, right? So while ostensibly we were saying customer satisfaction is important, we were also able to use that to say, look, it's not Rich Davey's idea. It's our tens of thousands of folks who are taking the New York City subway today or last month who said this is on their mind and we need to address it. So back to the commissioner's point as well, there are legislators or city council or whoever, who are, regardless of their party, generally responsive to their constituents. Yeah. And so making sure you granularly know, I have found that to be probably and it sounds simple, but the most effective tactic when it comes to moving public policy or prioritizing budgets or et cetera, et cetera.
Just to stay on that point a moment, because you talked about surveys and whatnot, Rich. Have you seen kind of an evolution over time of customer expectations? We were at point A, now it's trending to point B, and we're having to shift and evolve as it relates to that?
There's no doubt, but at the same time, needing to meet your customers where they are, and maybe to paraphrase what Collie said earlier, which is to say, like we can call up on my app right now, a virtual assistant at Logan Airport, and we can ask her a question. But there are those probably maybe I'll argue an older population who's just not comfortable with that and still don't want a self-service function, right? Want to be able to talk to someone. And so I think really understanding, back to the customer segmentation point that was made, really understanding folks and trying to meet them where they are. I think that's the trick. So, and as we're catering to 3 or 4, now 5 generations of customers who have all different needs and wants and expectations, that I think is a challenge for any customer-facing organization, whether it be in transportation or retail or hospitality.
Well, and you held up your phone and you talked a little bit about technology, so maybe this is a good time to shift and start talking about technology as it relates to customer service. So technology is transforming our ability to how we can engage with others. So what role do you think emerging technologies, think of AI, automation, digital platforms, what role do you think that is playing now in improving customer service in your operations? And maybe this time, Collie, I'll go to you.
Well, I think it's definitely shaping the expectations that the customers are having. And you don't have to be a time traveler to go into the future and come back with ideas of what you want. You really just need to be a traveler. And so any one of our customers has been elsewhere in the country, elsewhere in the world, and seen elements of transit and transportation features that they would like to see at home. The problem is they don't want this one and or that one. They want them all. And so our customer base is forever increasing their expectations because of their exposure to you all and the products that you're able to provide and the things that you're able to bring to market at a scale that could, quite frankly, overwhelm any one agency. You think about things like, Instacart and Uber and, Copilot. Our customers today are used to personalized, transparent, and immediate service, and that's what they want. That's what they want from us. And I think it's okay to be to be a good transit agency, and it used to be that getting from point A to point B on time was the definition of what you want it to be. But we have to aspire to excellent service, and that means building that rapport with the customer where they feel emotionally connected with your service. And that's only going to come from the kind of speed and efficiency and transparency that tech can enable.
Great. Commissioner, anything that you'd like to add relative to?
Just quickly, I talked about transparency. I think it's so important from a governmental standpoint to be out front to the public. I think for so long, we in Tennessee, we didn't tell the public what was going on because we didn't want to be wrong, all right? And so, we initiated for the first time signs on the roadway about projects when they're supposed to be finished. And that was a huge ordeal for me, because my staff didn't want to do it, because like, oh, well, what's going to happen when we have to put a new sign up, but I'm like, that's what we're here for, is the public, to your point. And so, we need to hold ourselves to that level of accountability. So, yeah.
That reminds me of, Commissioner, we've got 160 different capital projects that we're involved with right now, and you can't advance them all to the same degree that you want to, but your constituents expect you to. And I'm going to put Melissa Mullinex on the spot, who's right here in the front row, worked at MARTA until recently as our chief of staff. And Melissa insisted that we put out a public dashboard that kind of summarizes all 160 of those projects. So Melissa, we just launched it. It's out there, it's public, and I believe that's going to build the kind of transparency, trust, and advocacy, quite frankly, amongst the public, as they see, you can divide this thing by jurisdiction. It's map enabled. You can do it by stage of the project. It talks about the expected budget and the spend to date. So now everyone can have a stake in the development that we're building.
Great. And Rich, I know that you're also looking at technology and innovation to meet the goals and objectives of Massport and your customers. Is there anything you'd like to add to the role of that?
Maybe just a couple of things. Doubling down on the transparency point. Look, I work in a town that, has anyone heard of the Big Dig? Anyone? Yes. Oh yeah, exactly. You talk about cynicism from government around infrastructure. Boston has had it in spades. And for some instances, rightfully so. I'm also reminded, when I was transportation secretary, I also had the great joy of managing the Department of Motor Vehicles. And when I got there, I was like, well, the wait times for transactions are actually at the branch, but why don't we put them online so people can see? They're like, well, people will know the waits are long. And I'm like, well, that's the point, right? Like, back to the commissioners. So the transparency thing, part of that, I think, is government servants have been beaten up, frankly, unduly so, but beaten up about being transparent. So I have found a number of bureaucracies and places I've worked to be shy about that, but really leaning in and then showing leadership and saying, no, we're gonna take our lumps if the dashboard isn't so good this month, and explain how we're gonna address it. Look, I think on the question of back to the satisfaction, one other point I would make, and we can get to technology, is kind of what's in it for me. And so my team at Massport were like, okay, I would care about customer service, but why? And part of the strategy, at least for us, is we have a pretty heavy retail environment, obviously, in an airport. For every 1.5 or 2 of customer satisfaction that goes up, guess what happens? Spend goes up. And so if people are happier, they're going to buy more at the airport, which goes back into our pocket, which then we can, invest in our people and our infrastructure, right? Again, it's a classic sort of retail question, but really thinking about this sort of, circle of good, if you will, and so I think that's another reason why we've been able to put customer satisfaction at the forefront of what we're doing at Massport, because there's also something in it for us.
So just to delve maybe a little bit deeper on some of these emerging technologies, you sit at the CoMotion conferences, you hear a lot about AI, you hear a lot about automation, digital infrastructure, which you heard Mike speak a lot about this morning. How are you exploring those right now, and how that can enhance your operations and the service that you're providing? Would anyone like to jump in on that first?
I'm happy to start, and I think in a few ways. I don't know how any of you are, but when I go up to a recycling bin or a trash bin at an airport, I'm like, I don't know which way it goes. Right? Anyone have that, or is it just me? Come on, you all, right? Exactly, right? So there's this AI technology called Oscar, like Oscar the Grouch, I guess, that if you hold up your thing, it will say recyclable or not. We're testing that right now at Logan Airport. It's totally cool. We see it it's been at some sports stadiums and whatnot, but it's like a very small, and by the way, then you get a reward, like it actually says, good job, and people are kind of like, I did a good job, I recycled, amazing, right? But that is a subtle but I think important way not only to reduce our land waste, but also to improve the customer experience. So that's a subtle way. I think in the future, technology, for example, so Boston Logan Airport, if you haven't been there, the challenge with the airport is actually getting there. We are about 4 miles from downtown Boston, and while transit, we are the most heavily utilized airport in America, which is good. You can fit 14 Boston Logan airports within the footprint of Denver. So it gives you a sense. By the way, we have water to the east and neighborhoods to the north, west, and south. So we're not building anymore. So getting to the airport is a huge, huge challenge. So making sure that we're leveraging technology to let folks know how to get to the airport more seamlessly is as important, I think, as once you get there with facial recognition or AI that might encourage you to purchase more or to make your experience more seamless. But that's something we're very much thinking about. And then lastly, Beth, I'll just say on the technology side, one big idea we've been working on is the question of remote terminals, right? So as I mentioned, getting to Logan Airport is the biggest issue, and creating curb space is actually our biggest issue. And so we have talked about creating curb space 10 miles away in a suburb parking lot where you can go through TSA security there, get on a secure bus, and be dropped off on the secure side of the airport. So it's both, to me, it's digital, it's analog, but all trying to find a way to improve our customers' experience.
Yes, and you had mentioned in one of our conversations that you're constrained, you're land constrained, and looking at these different ways with the remote terminal and other ways of utilizing technology, curb management, things of that nature, as to how you can improve upon your service. So very interesting to learn about Boston Logan Airport in that way. Kali, I know you've got a lot to talk about.
Well, yeah, in
A
terms of,
train car, a mobile app.
I mean, you're right. But pick any one of them along the sphere of our customer experience. There's so many different, whether it's how to schedule your ride, how to pay for your ride, the ride itself, your perceptions of the ride, and so you mentioned the rail car. I'd love to talk about that. It's the effect of technology and our decision to tie technology to the customer expectation that I believe has led to the success of this rail car. So I mean, you talk about something that most of the public will never even think about, but these train cars have automatic coupling. So when I learned to drive a train some 45 years ago, you had to lower yourself like a gymnast off the coupler, the greasy coupler, line it up, hope the trains are close enough together, line it up by eye, get back in the cab, and inch towards it until you hear the click. You don't know how many times someone would slip or hurt themselves or how much time it takes to actually make that coupling happen. Today with this new train, you just push a button and sit right there and it automatically couples. It is the most technologically advanced subway car in North America at this point in time. I say that because this industry leapfrogs, so it's not going to take long before someone, properly eclipses us in that space. But for the time being, it's technology. There are 200 monitors inside of each train. There are noise monitors and visual monitors. It's tied back to the control center so that if the noise gets to a certain level, we can intervene in that moment. It's open gangway so that one police officer walking through can see and be seen. So we've had all our customer groups go down to Salt Lake City and help in the design of this, the interior of this thing. It's got more gadgets, bells, and whistles than I can begin to talk about. And on January 30th, when we opened the doors and had all the customers that were there walk in to see this thing for the first time, what did they say? Cell phone chargers. So it's about what's important to the customer, but it's loaded with technology, and we couldn't be happier.
Great. Commissioner, anything you want to add? Because
Just
infrastructure is a big part of what you do.
Real quickly, I mean, I think what these guys have said is amazing, and that's where we need to be heading. We are trying to insinuate technology in every facet of what we do in TDOT. I mean, one of the places that we're seeing it most effective is on the operational side with accidents, incidents, and what we're trying to do is look at how we control the first incident and the second incident that comes after that, and how we can reduce that or make sure it doesn't happen. And so, everybody's got cameras, right? But so we're looking at that, but we're also looking at how we can move more toward predictive AI in determining where the most accidents happen and making sure we try to reduce those before they happen. So,
In back to your question about defining the customer, someone said, if they're not paying, then they're not a customer. So we're trying to figure out this fare evasion question, and because again, another technological advance is our automated fare collection system 2.0, which will be online next year in time for the World Cup. But then again, to the customer personas, you start to figure out that that's not always the case. Sometimes when you actually identify why someone isn't paying, there are a number of reasons, and you really got to get granular in terms of, was the gate working? Was the lineup too long? Was ticketing, understandable and easy? Or was it in fact someone that just chose not to? Is it someone that needs our reduced fare program? So all of that technology allows us to further define the service offering, the value proposition for our customers.
I'm going to jump in one more, Beth, because when the commissioner said about predictive, I actually am bullish on AI's ability to help transportation with predictive maintenance in a place where, again, I'll be critical of our industry. I don't think we've excelled very much. So whether it's a highway bridge or whether it's a bus, or in my case, what you care about at an airport is a moving walkway or an elevator or an escalator. If those are down, that's not good for me. When I was in New York, we were piloting a program using AI for bus maintenance, and we were able to predict with certain bus components before a bus broke down. What did that mean? That bus didn't break down in service. And then the AI was getting so smart that it could then diagnose the problem and give our mechanics a repair plan. So rather than tinkering for an hour and a half and saying, we should change these 5 parts, maybe. The plan was saying, no, do this and change these 2 parts. So labor costs and material costs were going down, but more importantly, less breakdowns, right? So I am hopeful that that is a future that we can all use, regardless of what part of the transportation ecosystem we touch, because I think predictive maintenance would be really cool. And I just don't think we've done a really good job in that in this business, but there's hope there.
And similarly, those new trains, as they travel along those 104 miles of track, they send back signals about the reverb that we're getting off of the track itself, which gives our technicians the ability to diagnose in advance emerging problems that only a walking track inspection would have seen in the past. So again, reducing the amount of time that the crew has to be exposed to track level because you've got that kind of technology, just saving lives.
I'm going to throw out a question you didn't expect, but it's kind of a follow-up to this. When you talk about asset management, predictive analytics, the longevity of your assets and things of that nature, have you explored the use of digital twins, particularly from an infrastructure standpoint, and integrating that with the asset management approach?
Massport has certainly started that before I showed up, and I would say of all the organizations I've been part of, digital twinning, BIM, and really understanding the assets around. Now, the good news, it's a very enclosed facility. I don't envy either one of these guys who, have thousands of miles across Tennessee he's got to worry about, and a system that's 50 years old, 60 years old, and probably has been, woefully underinvested. I think on the aviation side, we tend to have it better. But yes, digital twinning, BIM, 3D for sure has made it, and by the way, that's also reduced our construction costs. It's made it safer for our employees, but that too, I think, holds out some hope. But for some of the larger systems, like New York City Transit or the MBTA, which was opened in 1897, there's probably some ways to go to get there, but that they need to.
And we're just scratching the surface with that now as we're developing our bus rapid transit corridors and discovering that, as you're building out these corridors, what you thought you had, you didn't actually have, and your as-built drawings are only as good as they were put together at the time. So we're looking at technology that can help us develop that kind of an approach.
I agree with them.
Excellent. Wanted to shift gears a little bit and talk about multimodal transportation? Because I know that's something that impacts, all of you and your customers. So customer service doesn't stop at one mode of transport. And what role does multimodal integration play in achieving your customer service goals? And maybe, Kali, we'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, I mean, when I think of multimodal, clearly you're right. We have, buses, trains, light rail, mobility, and we're integrating with TNCs and scooters, and but I start with the thought that the vision that we have is to have multimodal integration, if you will, of digital systems that will really enable our customers to benefit from sort of one digital entryway into the system. So we've got Gwinnett County, Cobb County, and the metropolitan Atlanta. And we've got customers that live in all of these different areas, and what we'd like to see is people having the ability to, choose their ride, plan their ride, pay for their ride on one platform. So really integrating the digital assets of all of these different areas, figuring out how to pay, how to plan, how to research information, and doing it all on one platform, sort of like that one ring to rule them all sort of a concept. So we're really working towards that, and as we do it, then of course we apply it to all of those different modes that we talked about earlier. So light rail, bus, rail, and mobility.
Anyone else like to add to that?
Go ahead. Well, I'll just say it's all about options. It's all about options. I mean, it's giving our people the most opportunity to be able to have a choice, to be able to get to where they want to go, and have access and mobility and connectivity, as we talked about earlier. And so I applaud what Kali is saying that they're trying to do, and that's what we're trying to do. Tennessee's generally a surface-based transportation model, but we're trying to give people options more and more, and looking at rail, looking at transit. How do we really become that multifaceted approach that you talked about? Yeah.
I mean, I think I guess in my view, I think the gold standard for any customer is a one-seat ride, right? So multimodalism, while critically important, and the flip side, Nat Ford was here, I think he stepped out, but talk about autonomy. Like, autonomy is not coming, it's here. Like, you can get a Waymo when you fly into Phoenix Sky Harbor, and they're doing about 1,000 trips a day now, autonomous vehicles picking you up. And so while the Phoenix transit system is building, really good capacity, at the same time, for those who can afford it, the gold standard is a one-seat ride. So it is an interesting question about multimodalism. At the same time, customers expecting a A to B journey and wanting not to be changing modes or getting on this bus or that train or a cab or whatnot. So the other thing we're thinking about, we're starting to do a strategic 10-year plan at Massport, which is the future of aviation. And in that regard, is Logan Airport not going to have short-haul flights in the future? Is it going to be you can just drive to a suburban, shopping mall and get a small vehicle to fly to, 50 miles away? Like, it might not be airport-based anymore, right? Yeah. And that's not necessarily too far off in the future. And as I said, if the gold standard for many folks is a one-seat ride, I think we have to be thinking about that, and we're going to start to think about that as we chart our course to 2035.
Let's talk about challenges for a moment here, and then we're going to take some questions from the audience. What do you see as the greatest challenges in implementing what you'd like to do, particularly when you're looking at innovative approaches and the use of technology? And Commissioner, maybe we'll start with you.
Well, I'll start by saying Tennessee is on a roll. I mean, we've got so much good happening right now. We're one of the most moved to states. As a matter of fact, I think this year, for the third year in a row, we're the most destination for U-Haul one-way trips as anybody in the country. So a lot of people moving there, and to Tennessee, and we've got zero debt from a transportation standpoint, no bonds outstanding, and one of the lowest tax states in the country. And Ford Motor just put their largest investment ever outside of Detroit into rural Tennessee. So a lot of great things going on, but with opportunity comes challenges, right? And y'all see that every day. And so we're all dealing with a aging infrastructure that is costing more and more to maintain just state of good repair. We're all looking at inflation eating into our revenue stream, and we're looking at a revenue stream funding mechanism that is unsustainable. And so that is the reason that the governor stepped up and said, I'm gonna do public-private partnerships. We're gonna try to do that. And so we're right on track now with our process to bring what we call choice lanes, which literally gives people a choice to stay in their general purpose lane or choose to get into the managed lane, which we're calling choice lane. And so we're right on track, and I think that looking at those solutions that leverage private sector participation in the process is critical to being able to sustain that revenue stream that we're trying to do. So,
Great, thank you, Commissioner.
yeah.
Kali, are you butting up against any particular challenges as you move forward?
Yeah, we are. Next question. No. Let me start just by saying the level of pride and promotion that the commissioner speaks of when he speaks about Tennessee. I think that's what we all want to hear our customers sound like when they're talking about our service and our products. So, in order to build that level of support, it really is, coming back to your point, is letting technology lead the way, letting technology build a kind of delight in a system that customers can actually turn around and start to advocate on our behalf. Two challenges for me is, one is fragmentation. So as we grow and we embrace different digital technologies and digital platforms, is the risk that the organization is going to sort of splinter off in different ways. So we're just going to have to pay attention to that. And we've got we've made an organizational change at MARTA to make sure that we've got our eyes on all of what's happening and trying to keep us together. And then the second one, and we've come by it honestly, is just being a risk-averse industry, right? So for decades, mass transit is in the service of, a very densified population, varying levels of mobility and vulnerability in a fast-paced, electrified, complex civil environment. And so you couple that with the fact that we have all kinds of oversight in what we do, and we're also stewards of public funds or tax dollars. So there's a lot of reasons to slow your roll, and there has been in our operation and in our industry. So you take a population of employees in an industry that's used to operating that way, and then over here you show them this new shiny thing, and so transit is going to be slow to adopt, and so it's a cultural bias that we have. Nothing wrong with it. I think sometimes, when safety is first, sometimes you do take your time and measure twice and cut once. But it's the cultural shift that we're going to have to manage that could be one of those challenges. That's why one of the things we've done is we've made a change at the C-suite level. So we've now got a chief of customer experience and technology. So we've combined the two so that forever moving forward, we've got a very senior person in the organization that champions the very concept that the customer experience is tied to technology, and if you're involved in either of those pursuits at MARTA, it all comes through this one person.
Great, thank you for sharing all of that. Rich, how about your challenges?
I mean, I think climate change is a huge issue, obviously, but for Massport in particular, as I mentioned, Logan Airport is surrounded by the Boston Harbor, and most of our real estate assets are in the seaport. Those are huge challenges that we're addressing as best we can, moving infrastructure up, creating more resiliency along our real estate portfolio and our assets. And aviation fuel in particular. So aviation fuel around the world accounts for somewhere between 2 and 3% of all the greenhouse gas emissions on the planet. And so this is something else that we're leaning into from a leadership perspective, which is what can we do in Massachusetts and at Boston Logan Airport to encourage the development and scalability of sustainable aviation fuel. It's so-called our Tier 3 or Scope 3, I think, in the parlance of, it's like, well, we really can't deal with that, so let somebody else. I'm like, no, we're going to change our light bulbs and buy electric buses and all that, but we really need to lean into this global question. And we are. So I think we're about to announce, is this off the record? Apparently, I'm going to announce. No, but we're working on an administration-wide a policy. A couple states, Minnesota, California, Illinois, I think New Mexico, are doing some really interesting stuff around sustainable aviation fuel. But that's a huge challenge, right? I mean, and by the way, I always laugh, not laugh, but we literally just parked the snow plows in Boston, and next week is hurricane preparedness season, literally. I mean, literally. So, and not that snow and hurricanes didn't exist before and after climate change, but we all know that it's becoming more erratic and more difficult. It's really interesting. I'll tell you one more stat that I found fascinating on this question around natural disasters in particular, whether or not they're caused by climate change. The president of the Red Cross of Massachusetts came to see me last week about something, and she asked me this question. She says, you know how many natural disasters the Red Cross deals with on a weekly basis? 6 a week. So basically there's one natural disaster a day occurring somewhere in the United States, somewhere. Again, not all of that is climate-based, but my guess is a lot of it is. So for me, that is the challenge that we need to address.
Great, thank you for sharing that. I think we have time for a couple of questions from the audience. Do we have any questions? We're answering all the questions up here. Okay, I'm going to keep rolling. All right, if anyone has a question, please let us know. So now let's look into the future a little bit. Okay, so looking 5 to 10 years in front of us, I mean, it'll probably be here, it's like right around the corner, right? What do you see as the biggest opportunity for improving customer service in transportation?
Want to jump in?
5 or 10 years from now, it's not that, you're right, it's not that
Yeah.
far off. I think the opportunity is the partnership between service providers and enablers, such as the folks in this room. Every time I get the good fortune to speak to people who represent the tech industry, I'm inspired by what's available. And if we can just turn this corner, and that's the point, you can't see around the corner, but we know that when we get there, the partnerships are already in existence. But I think that's going to be important. A strong understanding of, that our enablers understand what drives us, what worries us, what our key vision and objectives are, and then they turn around, kind of scour the universe and bring back to us what we can. But the vision for me would be, in a place where, in Atlanta, we're 6 million people and we're moving to 8 million people in the next 25 years. So that growth is happening, traffic is already bad, so we're really gonna need some solutions. But despite that, I have the audacity to think that one day, people are gonna eschew their cars, buy into the concept of mobility hubs, where interconnectivity happens, where there's a pedestrian, a bent towards pedestrian lifestyles, and transit has to be there the entire time. And we're only gonna be successful there if we're technologically driven.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I'll say real quick. I mean, when we think about 5 or 10 years, which is not very long, like you're saying, we think about technology and how do we get more throughput through existing assets. I mean, so that's one of the things that we're looking at. But I'll also say when you think about 5 or 10 years, I mean, I think the fundamental issue has more to do. Technology is going to happen, and it's going to create the throughput. The problem we have is funding, at least in Tennessee, and I think nationally. And how do we look at the future funding mechanism to be able to get more into infrastructure in Tennessee this year for the first time ever over our over 100-year history of a Department of Highways and now Transportation. We were able to get a revenue stream out of tire tax dollars in recurring dollars to the department. We've never had that. We've always been a eat what you kill, whatever the gas tax, highway fund generated, that's it. No more, no less. And so we've been able, for the first time ever, to be able to add to that with a recurring revenue stream coming from the general fund that is indexed, that will continue to go up, which we haven't had before. So I think that, so when we think about the future, I think about how do we fund what we're all trying to accomplish. So.
This is why I buy my tires in Kentucky. So, we've talked about a few things, but I think the one I would say is autonomy, right? We've been talking about autonomy for 10 or 15 years in the business, but it is here, right? As I mentioned, Waymo in Phoenix, I happen to spend some time there, and you can get, as I said, they have 1,000 now trips a day. But why is that important? It's important because the commissioner teased it earlier around safety, right? You know, Waymo will tell you they have like 88% less accidents, right? You know, there might be a story or two, but they literally, so you talk about the insurance industry being disrupted, you talk about public safety being improved, you talk about Vision Zero in cities that are, like, I mean, that's huge. You talk about customers who are disabled, who can't drive. One of my best friends on the planet, I went to high school with, has muscular dystrophy, and he doesn't have the ability to go out without someone driving him. That will be life-changing for him, right? Life-changing. And then lastly, I recall, this was 10 or 15 years ago now, so it's probably outdated, but there was, on the healthcare question, I was read an article, I think it was by the National Conference of State Legislatures in the United States, and they said the number one reason for someone with a chronic condition who had been hospitalized going back to the emergency room because they weren't able to have a follow-up appointment was the lack of transportation, right? So you talk about rural medicine, which I'm sure is, you know, a big issue, less so in Massachusetts, but certainly for places like Georgia and Tennessee, for example. You talk about the ability to provide people with healthcare options, with autonomy. So I think it's not just about, oh, it's cool, I get to be in a car that, you know, no one's driving. But I think it's going to be a significant unlock for other societal challenges that we have, whether it's safety or healthcare, or as I said, in the case of my friend who's disabled, it'll be a life changer. So that's what I'm looking forward to, hopefully in the next 5 or 10 years.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Rich. So we are out of time. We're going to finish with a lightning round. Okay, so it's a little bit faster than we anticipated. Look, we've had incredible dialogue up here and appreciate all of your insights so much, your experience and sharing the challenges and opportunities within your organization and those that you serve. So if there was one thing, whether we talked about it here or we didn't talk about it yet, is there one thing that you would like to leave this audience with before we step off this stage? And Commissioner, is there something?
I'll jump in real quick. We've always said what we're trying to accomplish is a program, not a project, not a single project, but a continued program. And so we are now within this last budget that we passed, providing the funding to begin work on our second choice lane project. Right now we've entered in, going through the process of one. We are now embarking on That was I-24, and we're now embarking on I-65, coming north and south. And so we're starting that process now. So it's a little bit of news because that hasn't been said before. So we're saying it for the first time here today.
Coexistence. I would think that we can't miss the point that it's not either or when it comes to technology and a deeper human connection. I think technology enables that deeper human connection, and when we're in the service of the public, it's not either or. The technology is going to allow us to let the routine questions get answered, allow us to get more information, 360 view of our customer, and really enable the person on the scene to be a deeper connection to the traveler.
Thank you. Rich, you get the last word.
I'll end where I started, which is you're only as good as your last rush hour. You are. And so all the technology in the world, but it's all about that customer and making sure that their particular journey is done. Otherwise, my mother will be mad at you all. So
That was a great way to close. Let's thank our wonderful panel here.
Thank you, Beth.
Thank you so much. Thank you, CoMotion, and thank you to all of you who spent some time with us here today. Enjoy the rest of the conference.